So I guess we'll start. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. As always, we're really excited to welcome Alejandra Navarrete Llopis here to actually, if not the final, almost the final lecture in this year's public program. So quite a nice way to sort of round things out and have you. Her work in her studio focuses on architectural design, curation, as well as public and private projects. She has been given several grants and supported by institutions like the New York State Council of the Arts, the Graham Foundation, and other European foundations. As I mentioned, she's a chief curator of the Oslo Architecture Triennale, which for me at least was one of the kind of crucial events in architectural discourse in the last years that really exposed, along with some other key events, biennales and so forth, that really started to expose a different way of thinking about architecture, as I was mentioning a moment ago. And this is the work that we'll start getting to see tonight. Her work has been given many awards and has been published and exhibited widely, again, some of which you'll see tonight. Alejandra received her degree from the ETSAM in Madrid, as well as studying at the IUAV for a year, and she had her master's degree, of course, from Columbia, as you probably all know from reading her bio, in the advanced architectural design. She's now an assistant professor at Pratt, and she also teaches at New Jersey Institute of Technology. So please help me in welcoming Alejandra.
Thank you, Ross, for the introduction, and thank you, Ross and Deborah, for the invitation to be here to talk a little bit of some of the projects that I've been involved in the past years. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I know that this is a difficult time in the semester, so I really thank you all for being here and to take the time to listen to this lecture that hopefully will turn into a conversation later with all of you. As Ross mentioned, I'm an architect from Spain and principal of Nami Studio, an office that works at the intersection of art and architecture to design spaces providing alternative social, cultural and material connections. I develop my work and interest through different areas, such as an educator. I have taught seminars and studios in Venice University, Columbia, and I'm currently teaching in Pratt and NYSCA. I work also as a researcher in a research project that I'm developing with the help of NYSCA, the New York State Council of the Arts. I work as a designer as well, and I work also as curator. I did the curatorial work at the Oslo Architecture Triennale, as was mentioned. For the past 10 years, I've had the opportunity to work in different formats and expand the idea of design, expanding the role of architecture beyond build structure. I have worked in speculative explorations and build structures, but also in that idea of expanding our role in site-specific interventions, exhibitions, actions, events, and publications that I will later come back to them. These are different areas and formats of exploration and presentation that, in a way, have been always intertwined. No? I cannot separate my research interest from my curatorial point of view or my educational perspective. So everything has been interconnected since the very beginning, since I was a student. Another important aspect of my practice as an independent architect is the different networks and alliances that I establish on each project. I do not work as an architect by myself in my studio, but rather I'm all the time establishing connection with different agents. So in 2006, I co-founded a collaborative platform of architects called Pacman. We're 8 of us, and we started a line of research called City Creates City. Following those networks, I started to work in 2014 with the After Belonging agency, a team of architects, curators, and and academics and scholars based in New York and Rotterdam. And we were selected Chief Curators of the Triennale in 2014. And we have been going on and off in our work. We just published a very small essay in ABA Shorts, this new publication of GSAPP. And I'm currently also doing two design projects that I'm working with. In fact, it's a coincidence, but both architects are based in Paris, and I'm doing one design project in New York and another one in Madrid. And for the research project, the currently one that I'm developing, I propose to work in collaboration with photographers, artists, and journalists. So together with Batman, I combine art, architecture, and public action to propose different forms of engagement. We started to work on a series of projects called City Create City, that is a platform of thought and action for social and spatial innovation, revolving around the notion of civic identity and proposing a series of site-specific interventions in different contexts. The first iteration was Toledo Creates Toledo, a competition that we won to curate and design an exhibition in an important cultural institution at the city center of Toledo. So as you will see later, we combine the role of the curator, selecting the content of the exhibition, but at the same time the role as designer or artist or architect, producing that content that was happening, and we were working also as exhibition designers. So we proposed this set of 6 actions that were happening outside of the gallery, and then we brought, they had a reflection on the gallery space. Some of them included this one-to-one reenactment of a Toledo house that we composed with the leftovers of furniture and fixtures found in the city recycling center. So this one-to-one domestic space of Toledo was proposing an image in the gallery space of an apparent obsolescence of the city domestic interiors and an archaeological totem of domestic consumption, as you can see in the picture. We understood action and direct experimentation to bring our architectural tools and knowledge and to propose new spaces and other relationships with the public, with the audience, with the citizens. This is the second action that we did. We did 6, I'm just going to explain 2 today. That we did an ephemeral gathering where all were invited to play with soap bubbles, reflecting and duplicating for a second the symbols and monuments of the historical center of Toledo. A video then was projected in the gallery to celebrate the evanescent city reflections of that happening some days before. The project revolves around questions, concepts such as identity, perception, body, memory, mapping, public space, and ecology. And we use the city as a testing ground of these actions, and the gallery space also as a space of production. So the exhibition remained open and accessible during 12 days of workshops, action, production, and mounting, offering other forms of engagement with the different actors and audience in Toledo. Another instance of City Creates City was called Cáceres Creates Cáceres, and we were selected to be part of a team of experts to present the candidacy of the city of Cáceres for the 2016 European Cultural Capital. We didn't won, or they didn't won let's say the award, but they organized a series of very interesting projects. So Cáceres has a very important historic center that has been declared by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. But it's a space mainly visited by tourists, as you can imagine, and it's only occupied by some offices. So people, in a way, have depopulated the city center to live outside of this precious core of the city. So the project proposed the residents to participate again, to populate, come back to the city center and play an active role in a urban intervention. With a traveling photo booth, we photographed and recorded 2016 citizens of Cáceres to turn them into a collective exhibition. The project used these 2016 images of the residents to recreate an artificial landscape and urban intervention made up of citizens in different formats and scales. We did real scale figures populating the streets. We did a mega citizen protecting the city. And then a series of merchandising objects as badges, balloons, shirts that were given out during a celebratory event that used the city as a place where citizens became active agents and not only spectators. Cáceres Create Cáceres was elected finalist in the 2009 Architecture and Urban Spanish Biennale. So we wanted, in a way, to question what is the role of the architect, and most importantly, the role of the citizen, to intervene in the transformation of our urban environments. In 2014, together with the Belonging Agency, we got selected in an international competition to curate the Oslo Architecture Triennale. I'm not sure if you know what a Triennale is. You know what a Triennale is? Should I explain it? So a Triennale or a Biennale, that you might know better, no? It's a series of events around a particular topic. No? You might know the Venice Biennale and the Chicago Biennale, right? So this is one that happens every 3 years in the capital of Norway, in Oslo. So before I get into the topic, I would like to bring to discussion the different formats architecture takes here in this project. So we propose 6 different platforms that consider architecture beyond the building. The After Belonging publication was understood as a space for architectural production and experimentation. The conference as a space where architecture is presented, connected, and challenged, incorporating relevant voices into the discussion. The Academy was a spatial forum gathering more than 120 students from 10 universities around the world into a knowledge-sharing experiment. The Academy was proposed as a space to test work protocols and academic conversations. The Embassy was a spatial installation at the Oslo City Hall that represented the ideas of a stateless democracy. It was a space to taste the agency of art and architecture to rethink political representation and diplomacy. And then the 2 exhibitions, the On-Residence exhibition and the In-Residence exhibition, that I will talk more about them a little bit later, were sites to test new spatial configurations and different material representations, experimentations. These 6 different platforms and formats were triggered by the topic that we proposed for the Triennale that we call After Belonging, a Triennale in Residence, On Residence, and the ways we stay in transit. After Belonging analyzes how architecture intervenes in the construction of new identities in a globalized and displaced population, for a globalized and displaced population. In a constant flux of people, information, and goods, the Triennale explored our changing attachment to places and collectivities, where do we belong, as well as our relation to the objects that we own, share, exchange, and produce. How do we manage our belongings? And for us, being at home has a very different definition nowadays, both within domestic settings as well as in the spaces defined by national boundaries. We're considering cases like this one in the image, the Asylum Seeker Center, Intershop, Oslo, one of them. But also, we're considering our own houses, which we have opened to unknown guests through home sharing platform for an exchange of money. And we're also understanding or analyzing its welcoming and contested rhetoric of belonging everywhere, anywhere. The transformation of belonging that is evident in such a diverse realities has destabilized the notion of residence, challenging spatial permanence, property, and identity. With this illustration, we try to manifest the 6 different platforms of the Triennale and the ambitions of the Triennale, no? That we try to appeal to different interlocutors, try to set up an international network of collaborators to address different audiences, to intervene in 10 different sites, and extend the length of this event. So this illustration is trying to grasp that complexity of this long-term project. I'm going to focus now on 2 of the platforms. I brought the exhibition on residence and the exhibition on residence. And so this is the on residence exhibition that was at the Center for Design and Architecture at Oslo. And the exhibition presented more than 35 pieces. The majority were specially commissioned for the Biennale. And again, we understood, or the exhibition was trying to present architecture beyond the building. And the pieces, for example, included arrangement of objects. This piece is from Rotor, but they founded a practice that is called, well, they are doing different projects, but one of the lines of works that they are doing now is called Rotor deconstruction. So they are dismantling the buildings before they are demolished, and they are reinserting the materials and the furniture in the design and construction industry, questioning ideas of value, of reuse, and how these objects that have a specific value on the symbolic buildings of a bank, for example, are reinserted into different contexts. So in this case, for example, they were analyzing in a bank, a series of these materials and finishes that were like very different in different areas. One area for the directors and the managers, and another area for the rest of the public or the rest of the workers. So they were using the materiality as a way of like identifying or making difference between these 2 different workers. We also brought the logical infrastructures that allow these objects to move, or territorial configurations containing societies, to digital systems organizing communities. In this case, for example, it's a piece called Movement as Civil Disobedience, that they were mapping the emerging networks of migration activists facilitating the movement of refugees, both regular and irregular, that were like coming from Turkey into Lesbos and following other paths into Europe. So they are considering the tension between the rising fortification of citizenship boundaries and the militarization of nation states on one hand, and the transformation of their borders by mass migration on the other. The project proposes that movement across borders, along with attendant technologies of facilitation and obstruction, to be read as central factors in redefining contemporary territories. It's interesting to see how they are mapping these networks of solidarity, and how technology can help to welcome or not refugees in different countries. So the exhibition was conceived as a still image to document the current transformation of belonging and design as accumulation of evidences. This is a piece from Paulo Tavares that is called In the Frontiers of Climate Change, where he's addressing questions of ecological and human displacement. So the exhibition space is designed as an open field where the audience could explore their own path and argument. We were not trying to create a single narrative or a defined and prescriptive singular approach, but rather an accumulation of these 35 pieces that were like gravitating around 5 connected areas. Those areas were furnishing after belonging, sheltering temporariness, borders elsewhere, technologies for a life in transit, and markets and territories for the global home. The Triennale's topic and also informed the 6 different platforms, 6 different formats, but also informed the exhibition concept and design. Here we can see that the design reflects upon the logics and forms of organization of contemporary storage spaces, a dense and floating maze where unexpected encounters between objects, evidences, and speculations can occur. The residence exhibition unveils the multiple spaces and media involving the architecture of contemporary forms of residence and how they convey new articulations between individuals, objects, technologies, collectives, and territories. We had another exhibition, that is the exhibition in residence, that was located in the National Museum of Architecture, and we understood as a counterpart from the residence exhibition this as a speculative platform focused on a selection of 10 sites around the globe that encapsulate current transformation of belonging. So it was important for us to bring this complex topic to 10 particular realities where the architect could operate on those realities. So sites in Oslo and the Nordic region included the Asylum Seekers Reception Center in Torshov, Oslo, the border spaces, technologies and transit areas of the Oslo airport in Gardermoen, the negotiation between the transnational workers, the natural resources extraction, and the legal border definition in Kirkenes, a transnational neighborhood on the outskirts of Stockholm, Tensta, where 90% of its population has migrant background, and lastly, an apartment in Copenhagen, rented through digital sharing platforms. The global sites in the lower row included a patient room in the Dubai healthcare facility, an Italian textile factory in Prato, in Italy, the technological spaces linking religious communities in Lagos, a personal cubicle in a self-storage facility in New York, and the houses resulting from the remittances sent to the coffee growing region of Risaralda in Colombia. I'm going to focus on one particular site to explain how we develop the topic on this site and how the different architects operate on this site through the report and through the intervention strategy. So this is the transit center for asylum seekers in Torshov, Oslo. And these centers were initially conceived for hosting asylum seekers during the period of their visa application processes. And this process can last between 2-3 weeks sometimes, but it can also last until 10 years. So while staying in these centers is voluntary, the expansion of the resolution procedures turns a transitory space into a permanent residence. This temporary shelter is defined by the legislation as a basic, sparse, but safe space, not necessarily a very welcoming architecture for a long-term stay. For each of the 10 sites, we commission a report from a group of international architects, artists, and journalists that offer particular and multifaceted perspective, bringing together different scales on each site. In Torshov, a team of architects based in Oslo called Eriksenskaya is looking at the center in a very different way. They are looking at the daily life activities taking place around an abandoned orchard. This space for them is a space outside of the regulations of the center, where they have, in the center they have very strict regulations on what you can store, what you can keep with you, and during one of the festivals hosted in the center. There you have the upper crest on the left side of the image. This architectural intervention can act as a relational set of conditions that both bring people together and offer a mechanism for that togetherness. So, with the ambition to build an international network of collaborators and to launch an open call for the Triennale to be as democratic as possible and to include as many voices as possible that we might not know, we launched an international competition a year and a half before the Triennale launch, with the vision to select a series of intervention strategies that operate in the 5 Nordic sites. These interventions were designed tactical and long-term forms of engagement with the sites and rehearse alternative architectural practices. For the Asylum Seeker Center in Torshov, we selected 2 themes: open transformation, that propose a legislation process to reimagine housing policies and regulations in Norway, and a digital platform to offer housing alternative for asylum seekers and refugees. Open transformation explored alternative ways of meeting asylum seekers' needs through new notions of adaptability and hospitality in order to overcome the narrative of us and them. The project intervenes in the larger process of displacement derived from global migration, including real estate market forces and housing solutions. Here in this picture, you can see their installation in the exhibition space. They are showing the app, showing a series of models that they did of the urban context of Oslo, and showing a comparison between a private house offering an Airbnb platform with the facilities, the bed, and the space of this asylum center, this asylum seeker center in Torshov. The second intervention strategy that was selected is called Modes of Movement. It was a city guide for, by and for asylum seekers. The project explored the potential of asylum seekers to participate in the cultural, social, and economic life of the city, and aims to make their presence visible within its space. By means of 2 architectural tools, a model and a map, the material for the guide is gathered and discussed in a series of workshops at the center. The guide, in the format of a set of cards, operates as an instrument and platform to represent the city and to reproduce interactions between the asylum seekers and the citizens of Oslo, but also to facilitate connections and integration between them. So each of the sites were described by the curatorial voice in the form of an image and in the form of a text, large-scale text, you can see there, and also the commission report and the intervention strategy operating on each of the sites. And the report and the intervention strategies are understood as 2 different architectural operations to explore new forms of interventions on each site. The sites are presented in dialogue with each other in a spatial configuration that unveils connection between seemingly distant realities. The design structure simultaneously encloses and bridges and privileges and gives room for visual encounters between spaces. It blurs traditional limits between territories, undermining then the idea of site as defined by national boundaries and challenging the political nature of the very site it occupies, the National Museum architecture. As you can see here in the plan, the 10 sites were completely in dialogue. Again, it was trying to establish like a fluid path between these 10 different realities that might seem disconnected, but they are, in a way, in dialogue. So, for example, in this picture, you can see, the description of the design, the technologies of the bed in an Airbnb facility there on the left, with the bed in a asylum seeker center, and then at the back, the bed on a healthcare facility in Dubai. So even though these contexts are like completely disconnected, suddenly in the space of the gallery, we can start establishing other connections. Or for example, in here, that this site is the migrant neighborhood in Stockholm, and the other side at the back is the space of the airport, where the entrance of the bodies in that nation state is regulated. So what is the dialogue between these two spaces in the city. I'm going to briefly talk about an exhibition design that I'm currently involved in. Hopefully we will open this exhibition in September, this coming September in Madrid, but I keep saying this for the past months, so I'm not so sure. Hopefully it will happen. So this exhibition is based in Alcalá de Henares University. That is a relatively young university founded in 1977, but is located in one of the most important cities in Spain. During the Roman Empire, the university, it was located in this site where the Roman Empire was very important, has a specific remains from that period. So the university has acquired several buildings that have important archaeological ruins. These historical buildings have several layers of architectural interventions in time, from its foundations, where you can see the old Christian temple, to the following expansions and renovations until it became a military headquarters, and now the Iberoamerican Museum of Art at the university, the exhibition that we are designing. So we understand our exhibition design as one additional layer to the history of the building, and taking as a starting point the context and constraints of previous interventions, and allowing the cohabitation of the different historical elements. The exhibition system is designed then to reduce its footprint to the minimum, and with the ambition to provide the minimum solid surface to allow the maximum exposure of the background. This very slim metal structure have to be tested, of course. So we work with the metallists in a series of prototypes, 3 prototypes that we produce until we get into the final design. This geometry serves both to articulate the facade, the facade of this very long space, providing additional linear feet for paintings, and to create alternative exhibition services at the center of the gallery. The aggregation of these modules propose a dialogue between the artwork and force the movement of the user in the gallery space. This is designed as well to be movable, so it's providing a flexible system that can be changed in each of the exhibitions during the year. So this has been a very long-term project. We have been working on this for the past 2 years, even though it's only an exhibition design. But it is important to understand that we have to bring together the different voices of the architectural team of the university, the dean, the clients, the artists, the manufacturers. And we proposed for a project more than 20 design iterations, 3 prototypes, 50 sets, and in these 2 years, thousands of emails, Skypes, phone conversations, and meetings on site. So while you are with also this project that becomes an obsession, no? That is 2 years designing this, we propose a similar structure for a competition for the exhibition space in the Spanish Embassy in Washington, and we got an honorable mention. But we proposed a similar structure because they were like asking for a very light and portable structure to be produced in Spain and then to be shipped to Washington, so that's why we thought it was a good idea. And they were asking also for a module to be versatile in like 3 different gallery spaces. So there you can see in plan in 3 different colors the 3 different gallery spaces that they were having and how the module could be adapted on these different spaces. And the last project that I'm bringing today is the research project that I'm involved with, that I got a grant from the New York State Council of the Art that is called This Is Not Your Door, Spaces of Exclusion in New York, the Lottery, the Membership, and the Application. The project explores the mechanism of inclusion and exclusion in New York at 3 different scales: the domestic spaces of affordable houses, the leisure interiors of private social clubs, and the educational settings of universities and colleges. What is interesting is to see how the document of the lottery that gives us access to the house, the process of the membership, giving access to the clubs, and the application to universities shape the spaces we inhabit. These regulatory processes and documents granting access shape these 3 daily life spaces designed on economic, class, gender, age, and race differences. The first case study, we look at the contemporary domestic interiors of mixed income developments resulting from inclusionary housing programs. That's how the program is called by the government. These programs propose to incorporate affordable units in market rate private developments in exchange for economic incentives. This architecture and economic model, in a way, render visible a double standard taking place in mixed income developments, one for affordable units and one for market rate units. Different facilities, materials, views, and even separate entrances for both subsidized and market rate apartments enhance mechanisms of inequality and exclusivity. The project will map and draw the connection between the transformation of the urban landscape, the admission to these interior environments, and the design of new communities, articulated through the legal document of the lottery in this case. On the other hand, this research also analyzes how the notion of home is represented by different media and how it's occupied by its residents. It will focus on the design and representation of the domestic interiors, the lobby and amenities, and the spaces of well-being. I'm looking as well as the technologies providing an immersive experience to as yet unbuilt apartments with dioramas, three-dimensional holographic projections, virtual reality headsets, and 3D walkthrough available in our own computers at home. And to establish a dialogue between the representation and technologies of the actual life, daily life of the inhabitants of these spaces, the project will chronicle the community's experience through a series of visits, interviews to the different residents, and a commissioned photo essay by local photographers documenting these interiors. The second case study analyzes the leisure interiors of social clubs, providing privacy, security, and comfort. It seems particularly relevant to look at these spaces, as President Trump has spent more than 30% of the presidency time in his Mar-a-Lago private club. This club has become, in his own words, the Winter White House, providing a space of informal access to the president to its 500 members. Together with the proliferation of initiatives as the Global Entry Program, a club that facilitates rapid access to US and other countries, these privileged associations activate exclusive communities and alternative forms of citizenship. The project will focus on current forms of membership derived by these social clubs and their role in the definition of daily life in New York. The study includes business clubs, university clubs, fraternities and sororities, but also beach clubs and well-being clubs, among others. The third case study focuses on the educational settings of colleges and universities, responding to contemporary discussions on fair admission, diversity, and minorities, as the government is questioning their affirmative action policies. With the contemporary deregulation and marketization and privatization of learning spaces, universities face challenges of becoming global forces run as and for business. The aim is not only to unveil and raise awareness on the relationship between the legal frame and the places we inhabit, but also to envision alternative models of inclusion and accessibility. Thank you very much.